A variance due to the pandemic that allowed driver education to be offered in an online environment is set to expire in August. Senator John Jasinski is author of a bill that would allow online driver education courses in Minnesota going forward. He joins me now to talk more about this and also to provide his views on the cannabis legalization bill that is moving through the legislature. Thank you for joining me.
You betcha.
You told the Senate Transportation Committee that 23 other states allow for self-paced online driver education courses. Your bill, Senate File 362, has bipartisan support and would add Minnesota to the list. What are the benefits?
You know, I think it's self-paced is one big thing. You know, today in our schedules, hockey or basketball, or you're going here or work or things like that, it just allows a self-paced course that allows our kids an opportunity or an option. It's doesn't have to be that way. It's just an option to do that. And with how busy we are and things like that, and getting to appointments, and it just makes it much more accessible. And I think it makes it much more easy for our kids in Minnesota to learn.
There are two kinds of online course offerings. There's synchronous, and that's what is currently available. In full disclosure, that's how my 15-year-old went through his driver education course. But you are proposing asynchronous, which means that it is not a live course at a specific time, but rather it's self-directed with 24-hour support for questions as someone is going through the curriculum. What are the benefits of this approach? Well,
again, it's flexible. So if your schedules are, it's mostly the scheduling thing. And then some people don't actually learn as fast as others. So when you're, having an instructor and you're going back and forth, some people can't keep up with that, or they just don't have the attention span. So a self-paced has been proven in many, many other ways. We do it for snowmobile safety. It's actually, you can get your pilot's license done that way through online and things like that. So I think it just gives another option. And again, I think both are good, and actually offering both methods are probably a great way to do it, because some people just learn at a different speed, and some people can pay attention differently online versus having an instructor or someone going back and forth. So I think actually both systems have a great option for people to do that either way.
Yeah, and I will say from my own personal experience, because my son's was, Monday through Friday for this 3-hour window for 2 weeks, we had to really schedule around that, and for him to be able to dial in whenever he needed to could have been more helpful. So about what is currently available, Senator Heather Gustafson has that bill for the live online courses. Do you think that one is better than another, or would you just like to see all three options available so that each family, so in the classroom, asynchronous or synchronous, each family can decide what fits their situation best?
I think all three are a great option. Again, as I said, many people learn at different speeds, have different issues going on, different schedules. So allowing those options and the person to choose which way, I think it provides the most flexibility for all our Minnesotans. And I think we can do all three. I think both these bills are coming up, have bipartisan support. So all three should be great options for everybody.
Now, but if nothing is done, then this variance will expire, and then it will be classroom instruction only.
And that would be unfortunate, because again, with what's happening in technology, how it's come along, I think it makes a lot of sense to do it this way. Many, many other states do it, as I mentioned before, and many other types of licenses and permits are done this way. So it just makes a lot of sense for Minnesota.
Is there going to be a way to ensure the quality of a curriculum? Will there be, people just making sure that the kids are learning, and adults too, a lot of people take driver's ed, are learning what they need to know in this course?
Yep, and DVS will oversee these and approve these courses, and I think there's one full-time person that's in the bill that would oversee to make sure everything gets done right and they're abiding by what they're supposed to do, and so yeah, there is a person to oversee it to make sure that it is working well. And I think, and I don't recall because it's been a while since I introduced this, but there's some looking back to make sure things are working well, and like a one-year review to make sure things are proceeding as they should, and we're seeing good results.
And do you expect all three to cost about the same, or would one maybe be less expensive than another?
I think up front, my bill may be a little bit more expensive to develop the software, and then once you get it there, but the other one ongoing with staffing may be a little bit more. But our bill also has a person 24 hours that can be there for questions, but that could be for other states as well. It could be an online, that could handle both areas, whereas the other one could be just directed just to Minnesota. So I would think they'd be pretty close. There may be some differences between the two, but I would say they're pretty much the same.
Okay, so I think we're done with that one. Let's move on to Senate File 73. the bill that would legalize adult use of cannabis. You're the ranking Republican member of the Senate Transportation Committee, and you've voiced a number of concerns about this bill that's moving through the legislature. It would legalize adult use cannabis in Minnesota, create a regulatory framework for new products. It would do some other things as well. What is your number one concern?
Well, I think public safety is a big concern in this. Safety on they keep saying on safety on the roads is a huge thing. I think that's going to be an issue. So I'm concerned about that. The testing is another thing. There's not really a good way to test right now. We're a little bit ahead of the schedule, so I think that's an issue. Workforce issues is going to be another issue, is, you know, with people working and how that affects, they get tested positive or negatively and those things. It's pushing more and more costs on our local agencies, and I brought up, and I've gotten some fun things about it, but, you know, local law enforcement dogs that now will not be able to use, and there's a lot of those local agencies have spent a lot of money getting those dogs trained.
So you mean like drug sniffing dogs?
Drug sniffing dogs and
Okay.
things like that, so those will have to be retrained, and some retired and things like that. So I know that was a big thing. It's a very small issue, but it's one of the things that you look at, because a lot of local law enforcement agencies have spent a lot of money for these dogs to get them up and trained and things like that, so that's one thing. I think my big concern is just the more accessible to our kids and more acceptable, and I think that's a concern. You know, I've traveled the state for bonding bills and things like that. We hear a big issue about mental health, and I don't think legalizing marijuana is going to improve the mental health around the state. That's one of my big concerns. But I think just the accessibility to our kids and the acceptability of what it is my concern.
So many people, including former Governor Jesse Ventura, make the argument that cannabis is no more damaging than alcohol, and alcohol is, of course, legal. 21 states have legalized recreational use of cannabis, and despite it being illegal in Minnesota, people do continue to use it. Is legalization inevitable, and are there any changes that could be made to the bill that would garner your support?
Well, I think it is going that way. Obviously, it's trending that way, so it probably happened. Again, I'm concerned about the testing, what it's going to do, and I don't think we have a good...
And you mean for law enforcement to be able to test a driver, to, you know, because we know how to test for alcohol, but there's no way to test for if somebody's under the influence of cannabis? There
is. They do some sobriety tests, but there are some testing, but they're called DREs. I can't remember the exact specific, but it's a different way to evaluate, drug evaluator, I think. So they have to train more people to understand if they are under the influence or not. And then, you know, what became legal a year ago was the gummies that we're seeing, the 5 milligram gummies, and a lot of people now are using those for sleep, to help them sleep. They'll do that. So if they're taking one every night and it's in their system, and they go to work and get tested, and that shows, you know, if they get pulled over and that positive is in there, but they actually weren't under the influence when they got pulled over, does that still show up? There's just a lot of unanswered questions on the testing side. I haven't talked to one law enforcement official in the state that thinks this is going to benefit Minnesota. Everyone you talk to has some huge concerns of local issues and things like that, and the testing. So, and the safety on our roads, I think we've seen that. And just, you know, the people I've talked to, I haven't been to Colorado or Washington, but I've heard people that have visited there and just said it's just they don't feel a good feel when they go there. They see more homeless people on the streets and things like that, so that's a concern. There's just a whole host of issues. I just, you know, and I've listened to both sides, I really have, and a lot of people are either way, and so I've tried to listen to both sides, but I just think overall, I just don't think it's good for Minnesota. I think we want to wait a little bit longer, see what's going on in other states, having better testing to make sure that's doing that, and looking out for our local law enforcement officials to get some input from them. And when we had them testify we didn't get a lot of input from them. There wasn't a lot of time given to our local law enforcement to talk about the pros and the cons and what's going on. So I just think we should wait a little bit, and you know, we'll see what happens this year.
Senator John Jasinski, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.